Okay, we're here at the 48th WBC annual convention with legendary fight broadcaster Bob Sheridan. Bob, how are you enjoying your time here in Cancun?
Well, I tell you, being in Cancun is wonderful, but the great thing is to see everybody in boxing, all your friends you work with over the years. Oftentimes, even in Nevada, I don't get a chance to say any more than a hello to a guy like Dwayne Ford, and now I can spend the whole evening with him, or Kenny Bayless, or all of my other friends from Nevada. And then, of course, you meet everybody who's anybody in boxing at the convention, and it's great to spend social time with them and have the learning experience of these clinics, especially the scoring and judging clinics. Is so important to really know what's going on in the ring.
Now, you've been in the game of boxing specifically for, what are we talking,
45 years.
Okay,
yeah.
So into your 5th decade now.
Yeah.
Can you believe the ride has been that long? Does it seem like it?
I can't. You know, when I was inducted in the World Boxing Hall of Fame in '04, and during my speech I said, when the introduction, it was a wonderful introduction, I said, you know, as I stand up here, I'm humbled because it really sounds like somebody else did all of this stuff, you know. I call my first world title fight in 1968 between Jimmy Ellis and Jerry Quarry, and coming up now in another week when I'm in the Texas Stadium, I'll do the Pacquiao fight, and it'll be my 900th world title fight. And in between that, you're talking the Rumble in the Jungle, the Thrill of Manila. I traveled with Ali, did 27 Ali fights, including Jakarta with Rudy Lubbers. I traveled all over the world, in Mildenberg, Houston. I did Vancouver with George Chavallo and Ali. It was so exciting, and all through the careers of all the great fighters of our time, Hagler, Hearns, Leonard, through the great career of Mike Tyson, when Tyson was a sensational, exciting heavyweight fighter, and the great careers of Julio Cesar Chavez, and just on and on and on, and anybody who's anybody in boxing, right up through the Klitschko brothers, who are the supreme heavyweights today, and the other wonderful small fighters that are putting on such great shows in boxing that people don't even know, like Finito Lopez, who's a Hall of Famer now, and Calderon, who just lost his title to Segura, one of the greatest fights I've ever seen. People say, how can you say it's one of the greatest fights you've ever seen? Because I have the right to. The 900 world title fights, that ranks right there with the best.
That's right. And now, you know, talking about 900 title fights as a broadcaster, that's unparalleled among your peers. And yet, you talked a little bit yesterday, and I wanted to have you elaborate on this a little bit more. You're still humble to the point where, unlike some other broadcasters, you don't feel, even though you have the right and you've earned your place, that your ego hasn't gotten in the way, and you don't feel that you know everything. You made a very poignant point yesterday about broadcasters, you being the only one among your peers at this convention and pretty much all the other conventions, and that there is still something to be learned.
There's a lot to be learned, but more important than that, there's a certain amount of arrogance, I think, by my peers, and it's too bad. They claim to be journalists, yet they disregard the associations. Now, I don't care if you hate Jose Suleiman, or Paco Bacasel, or any of the other presidents of the associations. It's part of boxing. These kids are fighting for these titles. And all of the associations, the major ones, the big four, the WBC, WBA, IBF, and WBO, are a huge part of this sport. And yet Ring Magazine, that claims to be the Bible, doesn't have the rankings from these. And I've discussed it with Oscar De La Hoya. You cannot disregard this. It's part of the sport. Danny Raphael is one of the best boxing writers of the world today. And he and I go around and around and around. And like I said, we're good friends. We just disagree on this issue. And I just don't know how you can not come to these conventions and see what they do. I mean, there's delegates from 150 countries around the world here, and yet the boxing writers of America don't know this. There's a lot of foreign people here, no broadcasters, but a lot of foreign press here, and they understand the magnitude of this sport. I think part of the reason is because in the United States, we're tied up this time of year with football, basketball study, we had ice hockey, we had university sports and all of that, and boxing is just another sport. Where in the world scene, they may have football, meaning soccer in our term, as their lead sport, or in Ireland, for instance, hurling is the #1 sport, but the #2 sport is boxing. And boxing is big in the world scene, and people in the United States really don't know it. And it's unfortunate because it's a great sport, and then there's been the influx of UFC, and people are constantly comparing the two. You might as well compare apples with hand grenades. They're two different sports. The fact that they both take place in the ring is the only similarity. And I like UFC. I like mixed martial arts. I've called it. I did the whole Bodog fight series. I really love it. It's not boxing. It's a different sport. I love the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I love the clinch game. I love the standing, striking game. I love it all. But boxing is not MMA and vice versa. And they'll never be the same, and they'll never have the same audience. So there's no wilting of boxing because of MMA. Boxing's here to stay. Our biggest fights now, the fighters are getting $40 to $50 million a piece. And they say boxing's wilting? What, are you kidding me? Give me a break. Boxing's bigger, more healthy, and more alive today than at any other time in the history of the sport.
And now specifically, you are immersing yourself in the officials' clinics and seminars here, and you mentioned yesterday that you actually just took a judging exam, scored very well, so you actually are a certified judge with the WBC. So you're putting your money where your mouth is when you say you know what you're talking about with the rules and things like that.
Well, first off, I'm a believer you've got to know the rules as a broadcaster. I mean, I can take my audience any way I want. I can take a dull fight and make it sound great, and that's what I do because I'm not a journalist. I'm a boxing entertainer. My job, if we get a dull fight, is to try to bring some life into it, make it entertaining. Don't forget, this is an entertaining television show for me. It's sport. For the journalists, it's not that way. They have to be 100% accurate in everything that they do, and they're the journalistic side. But don't sell yourself as a journalist and then you editorialize and disregard the sanctioning bodies. You can't go both ways with me. That's hypocritical. If you're a journalist, you have to report on the sport. And the WBC this week is part of the sport of boxing, and every boxing journalist in the world should be here, because this is bigger than them. This sport is bigger than the Boston Globe, or the New York Times, or the San Francisco Chronicle. I'll give them a break because they get the World Series, but the LA Times, where are they? I know all these guys. They're all friends of mine, and they belong here. Danny Raphael from ESPN.com belongs here, and he'll fight with me tooth and nail. And it's like, if you're a Republican, you can't argue with a Democrat. If you're a Catholic, no Protestant's going to believe you. That's the way it is. I can't help it, but I prepared myself. I'm late in my career. I hope I have enough years to call my 1,000th world title fight. I love this sport. I think it's the purest form of sport. Sure, we've had a negativism in the latter half of the last century when it was hooked up with organized crime. But that's 50, 60 years ago now. You tell me that the Olympic Games aren't corrupt? I mean, remember the basketball game? They had to have 10 finishes so that the Russians could beat the United States. The doping and that's ruined bicycle racing around the world. The drugs in football and basketball. There's been all kinds of scandals overseas. The Olympics are the worst. They can't find two honest guys to judge a boxing match. They have to have a bunch of 60-year-old men who work at Nintendo machines because they can't find anybody honest. Then they take an oath of honesty and truth. Come on. Come on. The Olympics are a fraud.
Bob, couldn't have said it better myself. Expect nothing but the honest truth from you. You're larger than life in boxing and broadcasting, and hope you enjoy the rest of the convention. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure. The clinic's getting ready, and I got to go learn some more.
All right.